Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. First of all, I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend for Congleton on her maiden speech. As a Macclesfield man, I thought I knew everything there was to know about Congleton, but I certainly learnt a thing or two from her thoughtful and informative speech. I would like to start by declaring an interest, Mr Deputy Speaker. As a former policyholder in Equitable Life myself, I have held a keen and personal interest in the matter for a long period of time. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak in this debate and would like to take the chance to talk about the human element in this saga. When immersing oneself in the subject, it is all too easy to get caught up in the highly technical details of legal complexity, maladministration and commercial misjudgment. But I believe it is very important to remember that this subject involves very real pain for very real people. Since being elected, I don't think there is a single day gone by without me receiving one letter or one email from constituents who have been affected by the failure of Equitable Life. I recently had one lady in my constituency in Weaver Vale surgery crying whilst telling me about the difficulties she had faced due to this mess, crying out of worry, out of despair and out of sheer frustration at the length of this debacle which felt like it was going to drag on forever. I share her frustration. It has been nearly 10 years since the value of Equitable Life policies were cut, leading to pension reductions of sometimes up to a third. For 10 years, 1.5 million people have been waiting for compensation. Some have even died waiting, and we know from an honourable member earlier that was approximately 30,000. Is it any wonder that faith in our politics has fallen to an all-time low over the past decade? And who are the people who have been waiting? We are not talking about the uber wealthy, nor are we talking about the reckless investors. The 1.5 million victims of the failure of Equitable Life are ordinary people. They did the right thing, putting money aside and trying to save for their future. And I am certain that all members of this House can agree that we should be encouraging a return to a savings culture in this country again. I would submit that the falling confidence in our pension system and the endless delays in resolving the Equitable tragedy are not entirely unconnected. It is only right that policyholders are given justice and as soon as possible. Failure to do so would only further undermine confidence in pension savings. For this reason, I welcome this bill and give it my full support. The contrast between the actions of this government and the last could not be sharper. While Labour did their best to drag their feet and dither, the new government has worked swiftly and shown that it will honour the commitments made in opposition. While this bill does not mark the end of the Equitable Life story, it is, at long last, putting that end in sight. I am very encouraged that ministers are clear that there is much more to do and are committed to seeing a fair outcome for all. It is absolutely right that ministers have taken time to reflect on Sir John Chadwick's report and have sought the views of others. For an issue as complicated as this one, it is pleasing that the bill before us is short and simple. For a simple man like myself, giving the Treasury powers to make compensation payments to policyholders without predetermining the level of compensation that should be paid. This should have been done years ago. If Labour hadn't spent their years in government endlessly delaying, it would have saved hundreds of thousands of people a great deal of anguish, and compensation could have been awarded in less difficult economic periods. Unfortunately, the last government used an absurd argument for not establishing a compensation scheme on the basis of its general responsibility to taxpayers. If one were to accept this argument, then surely compensation could never be paid in any circumstances when a public body is found to be responsible for financial loss and injustice, or perhaps compensation could be paid if the financial loss was relatively small and insignificant. Clearly, such arguments are ridiculous. I am pleased that such arguments are over and that even in a time of deeply constrained finances, the government is working to bring justice for many of my constituents in Weaver Vale who are policyholders. This bill is an essential measure in bringing about this justice, and I am delighted to be supporting it tonight.